If you enjoy this podcast summary, please consider subscribing. Rich Roll and Annaka Harris recently sat down to discuss the ever-elusive concept of consciousness.
It's been 5 years since Annaka first appeared on the show, and both of their perspectives on consciousness have evolved significantly since then. Annaka defined consciousness as felt experience, the simple fact that some collections of matter in the universe can experience sensations like pressure, heat, or hunger. She emphasized that this is different from human consciousness, which involves complex thought and self-awareness. The mystery lies in why some collections of matter, like brains, have a felt experience associated with them, while others, like cameras and computers, do not.
Rich Roll noted that the more you try to define consciousness, the more elusive it becomes.
Annaka agreed, saying that you can only know felt experience if you have it. The hard problem of consciousness remains unsolved, and neuroscience has made little progress in understanding why any collection of matter would have a felt experience. Annaka spent 20 years working with neuroscientists, assuming that consciousness would eventually be explained by complexity. However, through experiments and growing understanding of the brain, she realized that false assumptions were being made. Annaka began to question the nature of self, conscious will, and the experience of being a self. These questions led her to consider the possibility that consciousness is a fundamental property of the universe, rather than an emergent property of complex matter.
Rich Roll pointed out that panpsychism, the idea that everything has consciousness, doesn't quite capture Annaka's perspective. Panpsychism assumes that consciousness is an emergent property of matter, localized in every assemblage of matter.
Annaka's question is whether consciousness is fundamental to the universe, similar to saying that it's the substrate of the universe from which all matter emerges. Annaka clarified that she wouldn't say matter is emergent, but rather that consciousness is a fundamental property that we don't yet understand. She emphasized that there is no fully formed theory of panpsychism, and that scientists are receptive to her question because it's a legitimate and important scientific inquiry. The hard problem of consciousness remains a mystery, and Annaka's docuseries explores the evolution of her thinking on this topic.
As they continued their conversation, Rich Roll noted that there are infinite versions of this conversation that could be had in the multiverse.
Annaka agreed, citing the many worlds interpretation.
Rich emphasized the importance of addressing these questions in a way that stays grounded and provides value to the audience.
For Harris, the only way to address the hard problem of consciousness is to put it at the most fundamental level. This means that matter, as we perceive it, is just other conscious experiences arising in the universe. The mathematics and physics we use to describe the world are merely a description of conscious experience. In essence, everything is made up of felt experiences that arise and pass away in the universe.
Rich Roll agrees that consciousness is real, and it's all we have. Our perceptions of reality are flawed interpretations that we can't accurately grasp.
Harris notes that even our descriptions of why we have conscious experiences are just that, descriptions. The only thing we can be certain of is our conscious experience itself. Harris shares that many physicists believe space and time are emergent properties, not fundamental to the universe. She's explored this idea in her documentary series, talking to physicists who think time is fundamental and those who think it's emergent.
Rich Roll finds this idea brain-twisting, but Harris notes that experiences in meditation and on psychedelics can make it more intuitive. Rich Roll shares his own experience with psychedelics, which completely rewrote his understanding of fundamental reality. He had an expansive experience where time and space evaporated and the self dissolved. He felt a profound sense of oneness and connection, which changed how he thinks about everything.
Harris had a similar experience over 30 years ago, which still impacts her work today.
Both Harris and Rich Roll agree that these experiences are fascinating, but they shouldn't be taken as insights into the true nature of reality.
Harris notes that the brain creates illusions that are useful for daily life, but not necessarily accurate. Even something as simple as seeing a green leaf is an illusion. The color green is created by our brains, not an actual property of the leaf itself. Harris thinks that breaking through these intuitions, whether intellectually or through meditation or psychedelics, can help us see reality more clearly. These experiences can be windows onto a deeper truth, but we need to ground them in science to truly understand their significance. They discussed how our perception of the world is limited by our individual experiences and the constraints of language. Harris explained that in meditation, one can investigate all the felt experiences that arise, but if not responded to, they would lead to paralysis.
Roll shared his experience with psychedelics, which allowed him to understand the concept of non-dualism and the illusion of the self.
Harris mentioned her documentary series, which explores the idea that consciousness may be fundamental and goes all the way down in nature. The conversation touched on the limitations of language in describing experiences that few people have had.
Roll brought up the idea of extrasensory perception, such as bird migratory patterns, and how it relates to the concept of consciousness as a fabric.
Harris suggested that if consciousness is fundamental, it has a structure, and every conscious experience arises from that structure. The discussion also explored the idea that separateness is an illusion, and that we can look to nature for examples of interconnectedness. Harris mentioned that we can't truly conceive of a two-dimensional world, and similarly, we can't fully grasp the concept of higher dimensions.
Roll noted that consciousness being fundamental might help resolve some of the quagmires in physics, such as quantum mechanics and quantum gravity.
Harris argued that it doesn't necessarily resolve these questions, but helps us understand the nature of the universe better. She mentioned her upcoming article, which explores the idea that a relationalist view of the universe, where everything is in relationship to something else, is consistent with the idea that consciousness is fundamental. This concept suggests that conscious experiences are not just a byproduct of brain activity, but rather the foundation of reality itself.
Rich Roll was intrigued by this idea and asked Annaka to explain it further. She used the example of color to illustrate her point, explaining that colors are not objective properties of the physical world, but rather a way that our brains interpret light waves. Similarly, she suggested that space may not be fundamental to the universe, but rather a way that our brains perceive the structure of reality.
Annaka also discussed the work of physicist Carlo Rovelli, who has proposed a theory that describes the universe in terms of conscious experience. Annaka also mentioned the work of physicist Max Tegmark, who believes that mathematical structures, such as the Decoract, are not just abstract concepts, but actual features of the universe.
Rich Roll asked Annaka how the average person can interpret the idea that there are multiple dimensions beyond our ability to perceive.
Annaka explained that if consciousness is not fundamental, the idea of multiple dimensions is difficult to understand. However, if consciousness is fundamental, it's possible that these dimensions are not just mathematical constructs, but actual features of conscious experience. Annaka also discussed the idea that space is not fundamental to the universe, and that our experience of space is just a representation of something deeper. She used the example of color to illustrate this point, explaining that we don't experience the full spectrum of light, but we can understand that there are other light waves that we don't perceive. Similarly, she suggested that there may be other dimensions that we don't perceive, but that are still part of the structure of reality. Annaka agreed, saying that humanity is still in its infancy and that we have a long way to go in terms of understanding the universe. However, she also emphasized the importance of curiosity and love in driving our pursuit of knowledge. Annaka also discussed the idea that love may be a fundamental aspect of the universe, and that it may be the foundation of everything that exists.
Rich Roll suggested that this idea is similar to the concept of a unified field, which is a hypothetical field that underlies all of existence.
Annaka said that she's not qualified to answer this question, but that she finds the idea intriguing. Annaka also mentioned that she has a children's book on the subject of consciousness and the nature of reality.
Rich Roll asked her how she became interested in this topic, and Annaka said that she's always been fascinated by the nature of reality and the human experience.
Annaka also discussed the idea that consciousness is a hard problem, and that it requires a multidisciplinary approach to understand. She said that we need to look at all of the different disciplines, from quantum physics to philosophy, in order to gain a deeper understanding of consciousness.
Rich Roll agreed, saying that this is a problem that requires a holistic approach and that we need to be willing to challenge our assumptions and think outside the box.
Annaka also emphasized the importance of curiosity and love in driving our pursuit of knowledge. She said that these are essential qualities for human well-being and that they will continue to drive us forward as we explore the mysteries of the universe. The guest, Annaka Harris, shares her thoughts on this topic, suggesting that consciousness may not arise from complexity, but rather be a basic aspect of the universe. She notes that our current understanding of consciousness is rooted in the physical world, but that this assumption may be false. The conversation then turns to the main learning from video. It's all about consciousness, featuring Annaka Harris. The conversation revolves around the concept of consciousness and its relationship to the universe. Annaka Harris, author of Conscious, discusses how consciousness is a fundamental property of the universe, rather than an emergent property of complex matter. She argues that our current understanding of consciousness is rooted in the physical world, but this assumption may be false. Harris suggests that consciousness may be present in non-living systems and that it's a fundamental aspect of the universe. The conversation also touches on the idea panpsychism, which suggests that consciousness is a fundamental and ubiquitous aspect of the universe. Harris notes that if consciousness is fundamental, then everything is felt experience at bottom. The discussion also explores the idea that our intuitions can lead us astray, but deeper intuitions can guide us towards truth. Harris believes that integrating philosophy into the scientific discussion could lead to more productivity and a better understanding of the world. The conversation concludes with the idea that recognizing the oneness of the universe can be useful psychologically and lead to a more positive experience. The key takeaways from this episode are that consciousness may be a fundamental property of the universe, and that our current understanding of consciousness may be limited. The conversation encourages listeners to think about the world in a new and different way, and to explore the idea that consciousness may be present in non-living systems. If you are interested to listen to complete 18-minute summary and unlock detailed insights for each topic discussed in the video, check out quick podcast summaries on Spotify and Apple Podcasts with free trial and later, just for the price of candy. Happy listening.